Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking more Retribution Paladin. Specifically, today I had my first go into dungeons and was playing around with that a little bit. And so we're just going to kind of generally talk about how I felt about AoEing, how I felt about the dungeons and stuff like that, as far as, how our damage profile feels and all that kind of stuff, right? Just some general thoughts. A lot of times I'm more specific and make guide videos, but during this beta especially, or during any kind of new changes to rat or whatever, I will be giving a little bit broader feedback, and that's what this is going to be, and that's what a lot of videos will end up being, whereas some will be still specific, where I'm specifically testing one ability or something like that. So let's go ahead and get started talking about this. So I did just many dungeons today. Unfortunately, the first few I did, my logs, my log thing wasn't working, so I didn't have them all. But I ended up logging a handful, and I have two of them pulled up here that we're going to look at, just the last two that I did, honestly. And yeah, we'll look through these a little bit. Now, these don't mean anything, right? This is heroics. This is all you can test right now is heroics. You can make a character if you have the beta. If you make it on the this goes to 11 server, then you can make a level 80, at the level. And you can test out dungeons right now. No Mythic Plus to test. No delves to test, no raids to test, but you can test heroic dungeons and you can log them. There are some versions of details working out there, but I'm just honestly waiting until they put it on the main thing, and then I'll have details to look at. But for now, we do have these logs to look at and kind of paint an interesting picture of how our damage is kind of working. So we'll come back to the logs here in a second. Let's first look here at the talents. So I speculated when the hero talents first came out that Herald of the Sun might be the better AoE hero talent, in my opinion, and that Templar might be a better single target option. Now, I don't know still for sure, of course, right? We just went over. These are just heroics. They don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but I will say Herald of the Sun does seem to play very well into like a Mythic Plus setup, right? It is very, very good. The capstone especially, this isn't something that helps you on single target really much at all, but it's very, very good when there's a lot of targets, because you can just burn everything with these lines. It's actually an ability that I love playing with, and I got better with it over time. Making sure the line is burning as many enemies as possible. And so I do still think that right now that Herald of the Sun's definitely going to be the best Mythic Plus hero talent thing. And the only thing that really changed so far is this might also be the best single target one. I'm not sure yet. I don't love Templar as much, but Herald of the Sun just kind of plays into what they seem to be wanting us to play in talents and stuff like that. And it kind of builds on itself quite a bit. And especially in AoE situations, and especially since like everything's already built around our Wake of Ashes anyways, just kind of all compounds, and it actually feels really nice. The biggest thing I'll say about the feel of this is this Herald of the Sun and kind of an AoE spec. I don't know what the best AoE spec is, but this is the one that I've come up with which is just very similar to the spec that you would have on retail Dragonflight right now. There's definitely probably some optimizations to make, but this is kind of the spec that I came up with to run for now, and it just feels really, really good. But one thing I will say for sure is it's very fast paced. You never, because your major cooldown once you run Radiant Glory is only 30 seconds, you never want to have downtime. In fact, if you are going to have downtime, then you might not even want to take Radiant Glory, even though maybe you still do because it's good, but it feeds into everything once you just can keep popping it every 30 seconds. And so if you're in a Mythic Plus, if you're pulling a lot and you're pulling big pull into big pull, and there's very little downtime, it is an insane amount of damage. If you have to hold your Wake of Ashes because of, and we'll talk about some specific things, actually in one of my dungeon groups, you do lose a lot of damage doing that. And no spec wants to hold anything, right? But just the reality of it, if you think in your head, if you're holding a 30-second cooldown because of the way pulls are going or whatever, you're obviously, and it's like where all your damage comes from, like each time you hold a little bit, you're losing damage. How many casts of Wake of Ashes are you losing by holding? And so you want to be casting this very fast, which also makes me think about in raids though. In a raid, if it's a fight where there's no RP or no holding damage, again, this is just going to be a very good thing. Like any fight where you have close to 100% uptime, this is going to be very good. It just keeps kind of feeding on itself as long as you can keep using it, right? And even when you have to hold it, it's still strong when you unleash it. It's just, you definitely want to throw it when you can, kind of thing. Even if it's not optimal. And then in a Mythic Plus setting, you do want to make sure that you use it with a Final Reckoning, right? You don't want to just use a Final Reckoning without your Wake of Ashes / wings. If you don't know, I don't want to confuse anybody, but Radiant Glory is basically when you use Wake of Ashes, it activates your wings for a shorter period of time, like 10 seconds or something like that. It activates your wings, and so you get 10 seconds of wings every 30 seconds or whatever. What does it actually say? 9.5 seconds every 30 seconds. And then you also can randomly proc a wings as well that lasts a few seconds just by using your regular abilities. And that's kind of what that does. And it just, it's just it's a very powerful talent, but it definitely involves you timing things up right, I would say. But not a ton of skill or anything. Just kind of timing up your stuff. Just very simple things that you would do in World of Warcraft. So I first and last, before we get into like the logs and stuff like that, I just want to say how much fun I had playing with this. I haven't played much with Templar yet, but I just have much more fun playing Herald of the Sun, at least in these dungeons. And that's a good thing, right? We want to be having fun, and this seems like a fun setup for that. Now, I don't know if it'll feel as fun in a raid setting, which is mostly what I do, but it feels fun in this setting, I will say. Let's go through and look at the logs a little bit, kind of look how our damage breaks down. So first of all, we have 2 dungeons. So let me explain the 2 dungeons. This dungeon was the Rookery, I believe. I don't know if it says anywhere. I believe this is the Rookery, and then this one is like the new Scarlet Monastery. It's like an Arethi dungeon, and it's really, really, really nice. It's like a very, very well-made dungeon. And this one was more of a common group, like a not common group, but just like everybody in the group kind of knew what they're doing to some extent. And so it was felt a little bit more like doing a key on live or something. Whereas this group, and it's no shot at our tank was clearly a new player, and to everyone's credit in this group, everyone was very kind to the tank, despite being a new player, and very positive towards them and like trying to be nice to them and stuff. But they're clearly like a new player or a player who doesn't do group content that much, and definitely doesn't do dungeons that much or whatever. And so I was glad everyone was nice to them. But this one was a lot of really strange pulling, pulling 3 mobs at a time, and then accidentally pulling 20 mobs at a time. So this one was a really weird dungeon, but you still see some of the same kind of patterns as well. So here in the one that was probably more apt, well, let's go to my stuff here. You see Wake of Ashes as my #1 damage, and if you can use your Wake of Ashes on cooldown, that's probably going to end up being the case if you're not holding it all, and you probably kind of want it to be there. Divine Storm coming in #2, Blade of Justice, which is buffed with the tier set bonus, #3, Dawnlight, and then the Avatar rounding out the top 5. So Dawnlight and Avatar are part of your hero talents, and the Avatar is literally when you make those lines and burn stuff, which I talked about. So that's really cool. So you actually see 2 of my top 5 abilities were actually hero talents. 2 of the top 5 were things that are affected by tier sets and stuff like that. And then Divine Storm, of course, Mythic Plus, you're going to do, or in this case, our Heroic Dungeon, you're going to do a lot of damage. When we look over here on the slower pulled or the more oddly pulled dungeon, we'll see that Divine Storm's actually #1. That's because I was holding my Wake of Ashes, because I was like, well, we keep accidentally pulling like 20 mobs, so I want to have that ready for that kind of thing. And then you still have Blade, and then Avatar, and Dawn of Light. Now, Avatar I was able to use a lot better because I got more used to it as I did more dungeons. And if I could have used my Avatar as well in this, then it would have probably been even higher. Again, this doesn't mean anything, right? But, as you saw, if you were paying attention, I was by far the top damage on both these dungeons. But that doesn't, again, mean anything. I'm tryharding. I'm a very I would say I'm a very good player, and I'm try-harding and I'm trying my best and trying to learn things, and you know, I expect myself to do better than the average person in here. But I could have done even a lot more damage on this dungeon if I would have used my avatar better. And that's just literally lines, and you just want to put them through enemies, and you'll literally see the damage numbers from them burning from the lines. And it's very nice. It does a lot of damage, and it's passive. It just involves you moving your character to the right spot, right? You never want to. If you had 3 lines out, right, you don't want each one of them just targeting one thing and not crossing into anybody. You'd want to pull them all through things if you could, into you kind of want to turn them into a straight line. So instead of it being fanned out, you kind of want to make it a straight line by moving your character and getting through everything. And that's kind of what I learned and got better at as we went along. But yeah, as I said, and you can tell from the damage abilities as well, that these things just kind of feeds into each other, how I was saying at the beginning of the video. So with Wake of Ashes, this is setting up with Radiant Glory. Wake of Ashes is like your main ability. It's literally popping your wings. It's doing everything for you. So it's normal to see that be at the top, especially in a dungeon, right, where you are going to be AoEing in general. So that just kind of plays on everything, and then that feeds into your hero talents. And the reason this is why it feels good, right? Because everything you're doing is like impacting the next thing. You're putting the dawnlight on it. You then have avatar, and then you're burning everything with your avatar, and everything's kind of setting up like things are burning from your expert, things are burning from your wake. You know, like everything just kind of plays well together with this. Whereas in my opinion, the Templar one does not play as well in a dungeon setting, in an AoE setting, as this does. I don't think it feels as good. If we look at the other guy actually was playing Templar in here, and you still see Wake of Ashes #1, and then this kind of forces now. Hammer of Light's very, very strong, but you see if you're playing Templar, you're kind of forced to play press Hammer of Light as often as you can. And then Divine Storm actually took a huge thing for him. Now he's also playing a more of a single target build, although he does have Final Reckoning. It's just, again, Hammer of Light, I think it just plays more into that single target, and I know some people disagree with that, but I don't. That's when I look at it, that's what I see. And will I die on that hill? Not yet, but I might eventually. I might eventually die on that hill, honestly. So yeah, overall, I think this feels great. Obviously, I'd love to see it in a Mythic Plus setting, but I can tell you just from doing the 5, 6, whatever dungeons I did today, that this is going to feel good in Mythic Plus. 100% it'll feel good if you're like in a regular group, like a regular group that does just the basic pulls, right? Okay, I pull these 2 packs together, then I pull these 2 packs together, and then we skip this pack, and then I pull this, like does things in a somewhat efficient way. It doesn't have to be MDI TGP pulls, but if things are being pulled in kind of a just set way, you're going to feel very, very good with this. I feel like it's hard to say, and it feels, I don't know if it is better because of target caps, but it feels really good on big pulls, like very, very, very good. The bigger the pull, the better it feels. I would go as far to say that, like and of course, like you could say that for every spec, right? But like if just pressing Rain of Fire, yes, it feels good to see damage numbers everywhere from Rain of Fire, right? Or a Boomkin star falling everything. Like obviously that feels good too, but like there's something different about like burning 20 enemies with these lines that are everywhere. That like it just feels kind of cool. It feels kind of good to do that, in my opinion, of course. And then just like so much different ticking damage, the Consecration, the Expurgation, the Truce Wake burn, all this stuff just kind of burning on them. And then you're burning them with your light as well. It feels very Paladin. It feels very cool. I will say for the Arethi dungeon, the one that it's like a modern day Scarlet Monastery, this thing is beautiful. I might go back in that dungeon and do a video just about this dungeon because just how it looks, which is not normally the type of content that I do, because it looks so cool. And there's some really big pulls you can do in there. In Mythic Plus, I think it might be hard because there's a lot of casters. But Mythic Plus, this could be like a very, very, very cool dungeon as far as like big pulls. And just something about being a Paladin with the light inside this like Scarlet Monastery style building and burning all your enemies. There's something really, really cool in class fantasy about that. And maybe that's what I'm getting at. Like as we come towards the end of this video, is that Herald of the Sun actually does feel a lot of class fantasy as far as the Ret Paladin goes. I don't know why. Just I guess there's always been a burn mechanism to Ret Paladins, even if it wasn't physically a dot back in the day. But like exorcism, right? Exorcism is, you're burning your enemy essentially, right? And in some iterations, it literally put a burn on them. And like exorcism always did that. Just certain abilities just feel like it would be a burn anyways. And then over time, they've given us these dots, these burns. Consecration, right? That's kind of like a burning thing. And it kind of really feeds into that class fantasy. If you like that class fantasy, it's not just big heavy hits. That's more of Templar, right? Just smashing something with your mace or whatever, right? That's more of the Templar feel. Whereas Herald of the Sun is more of that burning Retribution Paladin. That's the way I feel. At least not everyone's gonna have the same class fantasy as me, and I get that. But for me, it felt really, really good in the dungeon setting. I want to see how this feels in a raid setting, because the feel could be completely different, right? This might not feel good in a raid setting, on a single target setting, whatever. But it feels very, very good in a dungeon setting, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised by that. As far as feedback goes, like I have feedback with the talent trees that I could give. Like certain things don't make sense in certain spots, or certain things are too hard to get. There's plenty of like issues with that. But overall, it's like, oh wow, this all feels really, really good. And so we're in a good spot starting off, at least for dungeons. Again, I can't comment on raids yet, but as far as dungeons go, we're starting in a good spot. And hopefully that doesn't get changed too much, because I like where we're at right now. So I'll put an end to this video of this commentary here. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel, because that helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I do encourage you to check out my Patreon that I just made, if you would care to help me out there. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.